And now it's time to hear from our keynote speaker. He says his learning mantra is keep challenging yourself and never be afraid to learn or adapt. So he is none other than Mr. Vijay Chachra from Marvell Semiconductors. To share a small glimpse about Mr. Vijay, he's graduated in Bachelor's of Engineering in the stream of Instrumentation Electronics from Mumbai University in the year 1999. And also he's having almost like overall 22 plus of years of industry experience spanning across high-speed broad system design, pre-sci-fi FPGA prototyping, post-sci high-speed analog and digital validation in telecom, enterprise storage, mobile app processors, and RF wireless SoCs. So Mr. Vijay's career philosophy is evolve through solving adjacent problems and win the stakeholders by solving their problems. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Vijay Chachra on the stage.
Morning, guys. Almost afternoon. Yeah, first of all, a big thanks to take time out on Saturday and come here. And I want to thank Maven Silicon team for having us here on a Saturday to talk to you. It's always very exciting to talk to people who are now making a graduation in their career, from starters to middle level and aspiring to go bigger. And I think with the type of industry we are in, we don't have the luxury to sit and wait and let things happen. I think it all falls on the engineers to make things happen, right? And I really admire the spirit for you guys to take time out, and I'm sure there are plenty of joinees on the online as well. So taking time out on a Saturday and spending time with us and giving us opportunity to come and speak to you, thank you. Thanks a lot. Right? As she's introduced, I went through like 22 years of experience right now. I started my career as a high-speed board designer, right? And then I went through a lot of transition in my career, but there's only one thing which I have learned, is you have to keep solving problems with your stakeholders for you to gain the perspective in your career. And nothing happens by chance. You have to make things happen. I think it is applicable to solving engineering problems. It is equally applicable to how you develop your career, right? Since you guys have taken the precious time out, I thought it's very important that we share the perspective, right? And the theme is career development. And by the way, guys, don't start yawning. I'm not going to give you gyan on how to develop your career. I think the more important part is to understand or get the context of where we stand, what's coming in future, and how do we shape ourselves up as we move along the axis of time. So before that, I'm a part of Marvell India right now. I would like to give you a brief overview of what we are doing. So few things. I'm assuming I have 30 minutes to talk approximately, right? Or before you yawn, whatever happens first. So first, I'll go through some part of my introduction. It's just about sharing my part of the journey, not to give you any gyan. The second is, where does the semiconductor industry standing today, and what are we looking at in terms of near future? And what are the challenges and what are the opportunities for us in the evolving scenarios? The second one is to get a perspective of what actually is a product development life cycle, and then the career development perspective I would like to bring along. And I was so glad that finally we took an example of somebody like Maurice Chang. It's one of the very understated stories in the semiconductor ecosystem. And it's one of the stories which I think we all have a lot to learn from. A person from a mechanical engineering background evolving to be the kingpin in the semiconductor industry. It's a story by itself, and I just feel it's a very underrated story. So thank you for bringing that up. I think it also brings along a lot of things together in terms of how do you develop yourself in that position. And that's something which I would like to continue in my slides here. Yep. Keeping yourself relevant, I think this is one of the most, if you look at this industry, you will see something new happening every 15, 18 or 20 months. It doesn't let you stand stagnant. If you are stagnant, you are pushed aside. If you keep running along with it, you keep growing. So I think the most important part of, or the most challenging or the exciting part of this industry is to keep yourself relevant. And I think that's something which will be very good to talk to as we go along. So first part, overall 22 plus years of experience. I have spanned across the entire product development life cycle. I started as a high-speed board design, system design engineer, and then worked myself on the adjacent skills to make sure that you have the knowledge and you have the perspective which is covering the entire lifespan of getting the silicon to the market, right? And every time I have done something, the only thing I have realized is there is a problem which you can participate in. It may not be in your area, but you work with your adjacent stakeholder. It helps you in gaining the breadth of knowledge. It makes sure that you start getting the perspective of where the complexities lie. And it also tells you how to get the product to the production stage, right? Learnings, I think this is something which you can't escape. If you don't challenge yourself, you will get challenged anyway. So please take an easier option of challenging yourself, because when somebody else challenges you, you have no other option, right? And never be afraid to learn and adapt. It's an industry or the products which keep changing every 18 months, 24 months. You have to keep adapting yourself to that. It never lets you stay stagnant. And that's why the way I put these slides together, and this is the breadth of topics which you actually work through and I work through in my career. I started as a board design engineer. I went on to do the prototyping and emulation at the FPGA for multi-million gate SoCs. And then I went into silicon validation, where we take the parts to production and make sure that we have the volume success with the products we are involved in. I'll go through these slides. There are like 20 odd slides which I put together. I'll be very glad to take questions, preferably at the end, so that we go through, and then whatever you guys have as a question answer, or you feel I can help you in something, we can take it at the last part of the presentation. And I hope that we are okay with that part. Yeah? First of all, I'll give you a brief overview of Marvell, just because we are not such a big name in the industry here. I think it's very important to see where Marvell stands today. Right? It's a $4.5 billion plus company with around 8,000 employees globally. So this is, right now we are growing. In Bangalore, we are close to 1,000 people. And I'll give you a brief overview of where we are involved in. We are basically an enterprise company which is focused on enterprise storage. We are on enterprise networking, and then 5G infrastructure, and then automotive on the wireless side right now. Right? So these are the product lines, right? And some of the latest and the greatest what you see on the enterprise side in terms of storage and networking both. And security is an inevitable part of this business in the semiconductors today, right? So you have all of this presence, and I'm very, very glad to say Marvell India, we have contribution on all of these product lines from India. These are the different business line products which we are working in, just to get you a perspective of. On the compute side, we have the data processor units. Networking side, we have the Ethernet PHY, and the Ethernet switches. On storage side, this is close to $1 billion business for Marvell right now. HDD and the SSD controllers, and then on the automotive Ethernet and the Ethernet for the channel server connectivity. It's a very, very broad portfolio, but very concentrated on the enterprise side of things. And then we have security solutions which augment all of those products. These are the end markets where we are playing in right now, right? And there is a reason why I'm going through this. It's not about talking the corporate portfolio. I think it will give you a perspective of what we are talking in the coming slides. So you have the carrier, which is on 5G. Then you have automotive electronics, enterprise, and data center. And these are some of the products where we have been involved in the recent past. And these are the products which are available right now, plus more than 10,000 patents which have been published. I'm part of systems engineering team, which means I do everything and I don't have any specialization. Sorry, I'm joking. In systems engineering, we basically take the silicon and we want to make sure that the silicon is ready for the market. And that's why you see it is in the center of the activity here. Hardware design is one interaction where the chip design team and verification team gets the silicon ready. And then we have the application usage, which means we talk to marketing, we talk to the application engineers. And then finally, we have the pre-silicon validation, which says that functionally the design is looking good. In systems engineering, what we do is interface with all of this and make sure that the product is working in the use cases. And also to make sure that you have all of those carrier and automotive and wireless and the security part, everything gets covered in systems engineering. And this is what helps you to get the perspective of how to make the silicon application worthy or production worthy. Right? So the hardware team is responsible for the board design, PCB layout, functional validation. We want to make sure that the design is functionally robust. And then on application side, we work with customers directly to make sure that the applications in which the silicon is integrated, we have the system level functionality which is fully working. And the last part, which is pre-silicon, is basically where we interface with the design team to make sure that the design is ready before it goes into the production. Yeah. So now that you know the product line and the function of systems engineering, I think it's very, very important to take a pause and understand where is the overall industry standing today. It's one of those industries which is very well on its way to become a $1 trillion industry by the end of this decade. Any one of you is aware what's the current total revenue which the semiconductor industry generates? Take a shot, guys, take a shot. You are part of this industry, so I am sure there are some numbers which can come out. No? Sorry? Go ahead.
600?
Yes. So we are somewhere between $500 and $600 billion, right? It has come out in the last decade. We have grown at an average rate of around 6 to 7%. And going forward, let me just burst the balloon. There's a lot of talk of recession, economy slowdown and everything. We are still looking at maintaining the run rate of 8% per year. It's going to be higher than the past decade, right? This is a snapshot of what the market research talks about right now. You are close to $600 billion and you are well on your way to become 900 by 2027 and cross $1 trillion by the end of this decade. That's how huge the opportunity is. You're talking about a $600 billion industry, almost doubling in next 6 to 7 years. Look at the base and look at what we are talking for a decade growth. In an environment where nobody has hesitation to talk, there is a slowdown and recession. Yeah? And what's going to fuel this? These are the different segments which are expected to grow from 2021 to 2030. And these are the different application spaces which we see, starting with compute and data storage. And then you have the wireless communication, and then automotive electronics and industrial electronics put together. I'll take a pause, look at it, digest this. First, absolutely feel good and proud about it that you are part of this industry. The second part is the growth rates which are projected in different segments. It tells you that the applications are going to be more and more semiconductor concentric, right? So you have a semiconductor centric development which is happening, and most of this growth is coming from these three segments, which is compute and data storage, which is the enterprise part, the wireless communication where we are talking about IoT and the user electronics, consumer electronics, and the third part is automotive electronics. I mean, a decade back, nobody was even talking about automotive electronics. And now we are talking about 12 to 13% growth year on year for next 10 years. A double-digit growth for an industry which was at zero. Okay, all right. Yeah, I'm more used to doing things than speaking about it. Sorry about that. Yeah. So I hope this gives you a perspective of where we stand and where we project ourselves to be, and in the segments where the growth is going to be strongest. By the way, I use the McKinsey reports. They're pretty accurate and they have a very pinpoint data analysis done, right? And we really think, if you look at the past decade report, it has almost come out true. The way they were looking at it in 2010 to 2020, it's almost a replica of the story at a much higher growth rate on a much higher base. These are the bigger trends. 70% of this growth is going to come from these three segments: automotive electronics, enterprise compute, and IoT, and the wireless part. I'm pretty sure by the crowd we have, everybody in their mind is mapping which companies are working in this. Right? You can blame us for calling you on Saturday and forcing you to digest this data, but I think this is really worth it. Yeah? What are the trends and why and how are we seeing this growth emerging? First of all, the biggest growth vector, almost 13% compounded annual growth rate in automotive electronics. It's a 2x jump in a coming decade. And you are talking about automotive content which is doubling inside a car. If you take out a high-end car, which is a driverless car with electric powertrain, we are talking about $4,000 of semiconductor chips inside a car. I mean, these numbers are humongous. A car which costs you around $20,000, $25,000, $30,000, 25% of that car is basically semiconductor. You are sitting on a mechanical chassis, moving a mechanical steering, but you have 25% of that carrier box being driven by chips, which are not even visible to you. And that's how fast and that's how exponential this growth is going to be. And you can already see the trend coming out. Even in the COVID years, even in recent past, after COVID, the fastest growing segment is where we see on the automotive side. And even if you take the low-end cars, the content is still very high, $500 of semiconductor chips in a very, very low-end car. That's how the evolution has happened. Few more fancy terms before we get into data. AI, ML, where is all this working? You have computing processors, you need associated storage, and then you need a connectivity between processor and storage. 6 to 8% of that compounded annual growth rate on the compute side is getting driven because the cloud computing, AI, and the ML trends are irreversible trends right now. So much of our life is getting driven by this backbone where we need these things to continuously evolve. Right? Sorry. And the last part where we see the IoT and the wireless, the backbone of that is all the 5G emergence right now. The emergence of 5G protocol and the applications which have been developed around that is fueling the IoT and the wireless growth, where even a low-tier customer smartphone and everybody aspires to go into a mid-tier segment right now. Again, a close to 6 to 7% compounded annual growth rate in the IoT and the wireless segment. And all of this, if you combine together, is where the growth is coming from in the next 10 years. Why are we talking about numbers? Why are we talking about trends? I mean, we just started the talk saying, how can you develop your career? How do you develop or how do you play a role in these growing markets? What do you need? The basis of all of this is a human capital. The basis of all of this is an engineering crowd which is working today, and they need to adapt themselves to develop more complex solutions. All of these projections are irreversible right now. But what it needs is a human capital which can sustain the development and which can take this industry to a higher level. And there in India now we are so uniquely placed because of the abundance of human capital we have access to. But what we don't have is how to develop our career so that we are part of this growth story. And that, I think, is going to be the theme for us and should be the theme for us to keep talking, keep discussing, and points to ponder in how do we develop ourselves to make sure that we play a significant role in this trend. Right? The increasing complexity needs that you guys or all of us who are part of this ecosystem, we need to be very good at problem solving. Do I need to be good at design? Do I need to be good at verification? Do I need to be good on static timing analysis? I think these are just the legs on which the story is going to be built. But the underlying theme is how do you evolve yourself as a professional who is going to be part of this story? Right? All of us wish to be part of all the growth stories we are, aren't we? That appeals to a basic human aspiration, but it also needs a certain approach on how do we develop our career, how do we adapt, and make sure that we play a very, very significant role in this. How do you want to do this? I mean, somebody who wants to play a bigger role, they first of all need to understand the complexity of the problem. And before we even get into some of the details of career development, it's very important for us to realize how much amount of R&D money is getting spent on developing these complex solutions. We are now talking about migration from 65 nanometer of CMOS chip to a 5 nanometer CMOS chip. And look at the exponential rate of the cost which is going to be spent to make sure that we achieve the production with 5 nanometer device. If you look at the y-axis, you are spending $500 million to get a 5 nanometer chip to production. 500 million. We are talking about $500 million spent on just getting the device to production. I can challenge you, other than space electronics, there is nothing else which is more expensive than this on this planet. Unless you are building something for NASA. But then that's very niche, right? It doesn't go into mass market like this goes into mass markets. And once you develop, these are the challenges. The cost that just keeps on going. 3.5x just as you move from 10 nanometer to 5 nanometer. And I can afford to talk this language because I know all of you who are part of Maven alumni here. You guys are working in the industry, you guys are very familiar with the terms, but I think this is part of us to learn in terms of what is it that is going to impact us in the coming future, and how are we going to get challenged. The challenge is, how do we improve our productivity? The challenge is, how do we improve the EDA and the automation part? Productivity improvements through EDA are not going to be enough for us to cover this cost. EDA can help you to go from 1x to 2x like this, but if you go 3.5x increase in the cost of development, there's a human smartness that comes in. There's a human knowledge, there's a human skill that comes into the picture. And guys, you have to understand, even the EDA development is dependent on a human skill. It doesn't develop by itself. That's how big the need for human reskilling is going to be for us to adapt to this complexity and make sure that we don't die because of these development costs. And that's how big this is going to be. And that's where the skills expertise comes in. The niche skill expertise is what you bring into the intelligence you get to your job, and to make sure that you don't spend this money again and again is the only way out of this vicious circle. Yeah? Sustained higher quality with a lower DPPM is how I achieve my production. But what I want to do here is make sure that my design is achieving the functional and the performance targets, right? And all of this comes with an engineering expertise. You have tools, you have instruments, you have automation. Nothing can substitute you and your skill. Even though we are talking about AI and ML, don't worry, it's not going to replace the smart engineer so soon. Yeah? The business challenge is sustained profitability. I cannot just chase the revenue. I want to chase the product value. And how do I achieve this product value? Is because of the way the product is conceptualized, defined, architected, and taken to production. If you look at any particular embedded chip or an embedded solution today, these are the segments which contribute to an effective product. You have a product or you have a solution, but it always starts with what the customer wants. The product marketing defines what the feature set should be, and then the design takes the lead on implementing and making sure that the design is validated, it is ready. And then you have the system validation and verification, and then it goes into high volume production. All of these are actually the career vectors. I'm not here to teach the PDLC part, which you are very well aware, but visualize this as your web. This is how the career web gets developed. The view is to have an understanding of all of these functions and make sure that you are contributing to these embedded solutions. I did some research in terms of India has X number of engineers who are working in the semiconductor domain today, but there's a very interesting information snippet I landed with. all of these functions, which are actually represented on the left side, we have teams or we have engineers in India who are working on these domains in different companies. But if you look at the distribution, we have very less people or percentage of people which are working on EDA, on the sensors, on the test, and on the others. And these are very essential parts of your product development life cycle. Right? And by the way, this is the latest data. This is 2022 data. It talks about the number of engineers who are working on the design and the embedded software, but it also shows you that how many less people are working in other functions which are equally important for you to develop an embedded solution. Take a pause. We talked about the industry, we talked about the voluminous growth, we are talking about the applications, now we are talking about the functions. We are talking about the functions which are going to make that silicon happen. And this is where our opportunities lie. Opportunities are across the value chain, right? And the career growth comes from, do you want to be a career generalist or a career specialist? And here I'm going to bifurcate into the career development story and just propose, suggest, or share some of the objectives you guys can identify with. It's a perspective, and this is the learning I have in my 20+ years of experience. You can't be developing your career without taking a holistic perspective. Of course, you need technical skills. That forms a very, very big part of your personality. That forms a very big part of your career. But in adjacent to that, you need the behavioral and the mental skills. You cannot handle the growing complexity. You cannot handle the growing business challenge if you are not focused on all three aspects. I just love this picture. Right? In an ecosystem where we go and work and all we worry about is how much is the increment I'm getting next year. And then call up my friend and confirm how much is the increment he's getting in his company. Right? And then I plan my career. Oh, I want to go to this company, it is giving me 20% more. Guys, all of that is a good part of it, but that's not how the careers are developed. Try taking a holistic approach. Try taking a balanced approach of this and see how your career grows by itself. You may not have to run in a lunchtime call and say, oh, how much percentage growth or how much percentage increment I'm getting this year. Okay, I'm not dinging all of you for doing that, but don't make it as a be-all and the end-all of your career. Please be conscious that a career gets developed with a perspective, not with a single-digit or a double-digit salary hike. Yep. Have a balanced approach between the expertise and the soft skills. And this is very, very important. We talked about this hexagon, and the reason I keep bringing this up is because it's a career web. The more value you provide and the more knowledge you gain is how you want to transfer through your career here. Strive for the business first mentality. Few of the learnings, I have had the benefit of having good managers, good coaches, and good colleagues. I have learned, and I thought this is a good platform for me to share what I have learned over a period of time. As I said, I'll repeat myself, I'm not here to gyan baantne nahi aaya hu, but I'll still speak about some of the things I have learned through it. And I think they are very, very valuable. In the hindsight, right, when I look back, I think some of these aspects have really, really helped to make sure that you stay relevant and to make sure that you are continuously in tune in what the industry needs from you. Yeah? Strive for the product mentality. Never worry or create a silo around what you are working on. Don't talk, I am in hardware design verification. If the chip has a problem, it has to be a software problem. I hear this so much amongst the engineers when I work with. Anytime you talk to them about a problem, it's a hardware problem, it's not my software issue. It doesn't help. It doesn't show you yourself in a good light. It just shows you that you are not willing to understand the problem. I'm not saying to go ahead and accept all the blames, by the way. But be aware of what goes in to make a successful product, and be aware of eventually it's the product that's going to win. It's not the hardware or software that is going to win. Yep. And then growth is never vertical. I had a very interesting anecdote in Intel. So I had a small team reporting to me, and then one guy, when he's given the performance management result, by the way, are there any guys from Intel here? Maybe they'll relate to the story. So the guy goes out after the appraisal letter, and he goes and he comes back to me after 2 hours. And he says, I told my mother this is my increment. His mother called somebody else's mother. The guy works in the same team. And the mother started comparing of what their sons are getting in the same team. And he's like, if he or she is getting promoted, why am I not getting promoted? So it is at that level where the mothers are getting involved in the day-to-day career. And this is a true story, by the way, I'm not making it up. I couldn't understand for next couple of hours to how to address that particular question. It has so many dimensions to it that you eventually go out, talk to your mother about what you have. You could have easily done it in the evening. The mother did not have patience to wait till the evening. She goes and calls another mother, right? The only thing that matters is, did I get promoted? And did I get promoted because he or she got promoted? It's very interesting, right? I mean, I keep comparing myself with others to find out what is my value. How does that work? It's so contradictory in nature, right? So the growth cannot be only vertical because I'm getting promoted, I'm growing. It also should mean that I'm doing different things, I'm growing in my knowledge. Eventually the company, the system has to realize that you are much more valuable than just a single promotion. Yeah? A disclaimer again, don't stop expecting promotion. Yeah, but don't go and talk to your mothers in lunchtime and make them also worry along with yourself. Yeah? So for sustained business, the secret is to make sure that you are oriented towards customer, you are oriented towards stakeholders. That's something I really want you to take home with yourself today. Yeah? And how do you do that, right? So you have to work on ideas, you have to work on innovation, and that's what helps you in creating the business value. The moment you create the business value is the moment you get tagged as a prized asset in the company. Yeah? But career web is what you should be visualizing, not just the breadth and the depth part of it. Possibilities and choices, right? If you look at this diagram on the left side, it shows you one color versus multiple colors is because the person on the left is a specialist. It means a person who is doing verification, he does not want to listen to anything in this world. Versus a person who is a generalist, they want to learn about different topics and they want to make sure that they have the breadth to cover. What do you think is better here? Sorry guys, I'm forcing you to think on Saturdays too. Journalist? That's it? Okay, that's one. Others?
Vertical knowledge in one domain with
Depth?
good amount of horizontal knowledge.
So both?
Like you can't have vertical knowledge in all domains, so keep a balance on horizontal knowledge as well as focus on vertical.
Even though we have a limited space or limited sample size here, I'm still seeing two opinions, so I'm very happy to see that. Yeah? Both comes with pros and cons. These are the pros and cons on the generalist side and the specialist side. Right? So you can consider yourself as master of none, or you can consider that you are aware about many functions and you can contribute much more broadly. Right? It's a perspective you need to have. You can talk about being a job security because I am a specialist, nobody can displace me, but it also tells you that your career is very inflexible. It also limits the horizon which you have as part of it. Right? As I said, the picture there is a balance between attitude and aptitude. The aptitude part you have to keep realizing of what you want to be here. It also depends on your aspiration and your own eagerness to go into depth or spread yourself horizontally. But please have a view, please think about it and see what appeals to you, what works for you, and what is more conducive to your environment. Yeah? I think we already talked about it. So the specialist comes with an in-depth expertise and the generalist comes with a very, very horizontal scope. It's an owner's prerogative. This is how I map my career, or at least what I have seen with senior experienced professionals. They go through these 6 stages of career development. And it's very important, you guys who are in the middle of your professional life, you have had a good start, you are part of an ecosystem. The ecosystem is going to grow, the complexity is going to grow, the challenges are not going to stop. It's very important for you to see where you stand and how do you want to take a step further to make sure you are part of the story which is going to get more complex and hence more exciting and hence many more opportunities coming your way. Yeah? No, that's fine. It never goes into a linear line, right? I am at a grade 1, I don't want to go to grade 2, grade 3, and it cannot be a story just like that. You have to go through the reskilling part. And that's a perspective I was sharing with Shiva when we were talking before the event starts. We have to talk about the skills development. We have to talk about how Maven contributes to these particular activities and how do we guide the professionals in terms of how to take their career further. It's a very, very understated story today, but the significance cannot be talked about more. You are talking about $500 million of cost to develop a chip, but you are not talking about how that human capital can be developed. Right? And that itself is a challenge on how do we shape ourselves to make sure that one, we are viable, we are working. The second, we are being seen as a problem solvers. Right? And that's the perspective. It brings you all the development opportunities, right? And develop the broad focus and focus on solving business issues. I think that's what is going to help you. In summary, I think I have spoken enough, right? The growing demand, high focus applications where you have concentration of chips growing right now, it's going to create more demand for high value and niche human capital. And I think that is where we should be looking at on how do we position ourselves and make sure that we take opportunity. Indian semiconductor ecosystem, there are many stories coming around, right? Everybody is trying to push for all the right reasons, but it cannot sustain itself without the human capital which has to take this ahead. Identify your work, drive your career development, and that's something which I would like to put more emphasis on. You own your career, not your manager, definitely not your mother. Okay, they did their part in growing you up, growing through education, but please make sure that you own your career. Yep. Here it is, my contact details, but with that I would like to finish my talk. I hope that was valuable. All right. I think that, thank you so much guys. Thanks for your time.
That was a great speech, Vijay. Thank you so much.